it's an honor to have Ken do this for us, guys, because he doesn't do this for a lot of people. And we're kind of matchy.
You guys are.
Here's the better looking one.
Is
But
this white shirt here? What, I forgot. Did
I
I get
wear a white shirt all summer. So that's what I got. You
Feel
guys
like
sit
I'm,
on the X.
I feel like I'm in the psych ward somewhere.
Well, you might be here, you might be. Morning, everybody, welcome. New faces here, got Amir over here, we've missed him, I think.
What's that? Amir, that's right. So Amir, welcome to the company. New to the business, being mentored by one of the finest. So thank you very much. So you sit down, you're fine. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Yeah, I just got a little bit of housekeeping here for all of you. Daisy is gonna like this one. I sent a couple of you a little bit of a, well, I didn't send it, I don't think I sent it out to everybody, but Fintrac's on the warpath again. And they find a company over in North Van for $80,000. And they find the manager and find the owner and find everybody else for little simple things about Fintrac. Fintrac is our identification. And you got to fill in those Fintrac forms. Even the property managers have to kind of go that way. We need certain things. So a couple of little things that we've noticed are when you have whatever their vocation is, or if they're retired or whatever, what are they retired as? What was their profession? Were they a retired teacher or retired accountant, whatever it is? Get a little bit more specific on that if you could, please. We need to know about their occupation. So if they, and that's a pretty easy one. That's low hanging fruit. So please do that. Put something in there. Because we are being audited by these guys. We just finished our BCFSA audit. That was huge. And they came across a whole bunch of stuff, mostly property management things, but they got their eye on us. The other thing they have their eye on is your advertising. Just before I get on the advertising, let's talk a little bit about the Fintrac again. They're digging a little deeper into where the money's coming from. So when you do your deposits, normally it's a bank transfer from an account, whatever. If it's a bank to bank, you got the account number and information on there. And Daisy can give that to you if the money's been transferred in. You can put the bank account number where it's coming from. So it's not good enough. It's a bank draft or whatever. We need to know what their account is coming from. So if I'm your client, it's my checking account, what account number, and so on and so forth. Now, if they refuse to give that to you, refuse to give it to me.
Yeah, I had one.
Yeah.
What am I giving you my personal bank account for?
And at least we've got something in there. I mean, that's all we can do. We're not investigators. We don't have any mandate to demand some of this information, but we certainly have to ask for it. And that's what Fintrac is looking at. So we don't want to get caught up in one of these frivolous kind of audits where they need to find something. And that's kind of seems to be what they're looking for. So please, we're going to be on you guys now to put where the money's coming from. If it's a bank draft, what account it came out of, and even if you put my personal checking account, RBC 12th and Vine, whatever, that's fine. Maybe not the account number, but something in there as much as you can. And retired, I think one of the guys asked, well, she's a homemaker, a housewife. And so we'll put retired homemaker in there. And well, that's not a good thing to put. Well, I don't know what to put. I mean, she was a homemaker. What are you saying? What's wrong with that? I mean, it's a very valid thing to do. A lot of people do that. So anyway, put something there anyway. Robbie, how are you? Nice to see you. Showing up here at 11 o'clock. Thank you. You looking good though? Looking summery? How's your car?
Fabulous.
Good. Yeah, I've seen that. Good for you. All right. So Fintrac, we got a little more information on and if you can make a note, we'll send a note out to everybody on that. We'll send you an email covering all the little things we got here. They're just minor stuff, but I need to put them out there. We need to give them to you guys so that, if we do get audited, we're doing our job. But please read your emails, okay? We don't send a whole lot. I try not to send you guys emails every week and every 2 days, that. When they come out, they're important. Please read them, make a note, going forward, and want to be able to do that. Don't leave it blank. Whatever you do, don't leave it blank. If you have a problem, call Daisy, call me. We'll kind of help you through it. No big deal there. Where the money came from is kind of important. Now back to our audit from BCFSA advertising. And I got a couple of calls from you new guys when you're setting up your websites and stuff like that. Century 21 has to be prominent on your websites, okay? So hopefully it's on your first page there. I know that there's a bone of contention there where it should be, how much it is. But be proud that you're with Century 21. Hey, it's a very good brand. I mean, it's a very valuable brand. Don't be kind of hiding that away in the corner somewhere. Put that up there front and center, especially the property manager guys. And I'm having problems identifying who you are by some of your advertising. It's got to be Century 21. People, the public, the general public needs to know who you are and who you're really, who to come to if they got a complaint. And it's Century 21 in town realty. So please put that on all of your advertising going forward. Some other, hey guys, say welcome. Say hi to everybody. Let's get this party started. Anna's here, yeah, we're here now, and Chris is here, so we're ready to go. We're gonna rock and roll. So we got our Fintrac, we got the just for you guys who just came in, we're gonna need more information on your Fintrac. Occupation and your retired, what it is, and for their money part, where the money's coming from, what account it's coming out of. So we're going to be pushing that a little bit. Advertising, make sure that the Century 21 in-town realty is prominent on everything. I've got a couple of questions for Ken in here. Subject free offers, guys. Had some problems with that. We had a subject free offer go down last week. It kind of went sideways. The people don't seem to understand what subject free is. The buyers, we're representing the buyers. And they went in where they had in their contract where they could come in and view the place a couple of times and do an inspection, whatever. Well, big deal. You can whatever you can view it 100 times. But if you went subject free, you can do your inspection, but whatever you find, you can't go back on. You can't say, oh, I want this done and that done. Well, for some reason, they have all these little things on there. So when you're doing a subject free, be very, very careful about those when you're dealing with a buyer and even the seller. Just make sure it's they understand what it is. And we have two forms that we use when we're going subject free. We have the Century 21 form, and Angel's got a copy of that. Daisy's got a copy of that. It's the waiver of inspection form, and it's kind of like thumps them on the head with the hammer. And it says, we've the realtor and Century 21 have discussed, waiving the inspection on that and waiving, the conditions on it. And we've brought that up, and we the consequences of going subject free here now. You're not able to do anything, and you're exonerating us from any liability relative to this. Well, this is what we want that. And there's another form as well on web forms. It's called buyer's acknowledgement of waiver of conditions, I think it's called. So make sure you use both of those. You can't cover yourself enough on those subject free offers. We have the rescission period going on, and that's to protect people from going these subject free and on so and so. Anyway, long story short on that one there is now the buyer wants to do all this stuff, and they're complaining about this and complaining about that. Well, it's buyer beware. When you go subject free, it as is where is. You can't come back and say, no, we want this done. Now, as per the contract, everything should be in working order, but that's about it. If there's something else wrong, you can't come back and do that. So make sure you're having that conversation with your client. Be perfectly clear on that one there. There's no coming back in that. So I've been going back and forth in the weekend with the other managing broker, the realtors and everything else. And all we can do is kind of keep a lid on it. And the thing is, if you get caught in some of the situation like that, and this kind of has to do with rules of cooperation, is always, guys, leave the line of communications open. So even if Mike calls me and, he's called me 5 times now, and the buyer wants this or that, Mike, I've talked to my guy. There's nothing more I can do. I've left a message for him. I'll get back to you when he calls. Mike says another one. Well, Mike, I'm sorry I haven't heard from him yet. You need that response back just so people know that you're on it. If you just ignore them, and you hear this all the time with realtors, oh, they just block me, they don't care. Well, that's what causes the problem. That's when the anxiety levels go up. The buyers or the sellers, in whatever case it might be, their anxiety level starts to jump up a little bit when you're not responding. At least when they say, I'll get back to you Monday, I'm out of town, and this is the whole thing. Everybody was away, the whole thing. And I'm surprised the managing broker answered the phone. I'm surprised I called to answer my phone, kind of thing. So we all have lives as well. But, you know, he answered his phone and I got back to him. We got back to the clients and we're on it. You know, they're all out of town right now. They're gonna be back on Monday and they're gonna start working on it. We'll get, the lawyers are back and their buddies in town and we'll start working. Now this is a quick close. So, I think the big thing there and the note there is if you're going subject free, be very careful. Make sure you're getting the proper waivers. And keep the line of communications open when you got a problem deal. Go ahead.
Sorry, Doug, just before you move on too far from it, the Fintrac for receipt of funds, I've run into it a few times where buyers are like, I want to keep in my bank account. No, I refuse. And then I put right on there, client doesn't want to provide. And I've submitted it to Daisy that way. Is that like,
It's fine.
okay,
That's fine. We just had that conversation. We can't do anything about it. We can ask for it. That's all we can do. You're not a cop.
yeah, exactly.
You know, you're not an accountant, you're not CRA. You know, so we can ask for it, but do ask for it.
I do, yeah.
And do put in there, fill something in on the form, because we can't, you know, we're stuck, you know, liability on that. When BCFSA comes in, well, they didn't put anything in the form. Well, he asked for it, but they refused to give it. So refuse to give it is an answer.
Yeah, I put that on.
You know, and what I said earlier is I said, maybe they don't want to give your bank account number, but maybe it's my personal account and Royal Bank on Fifth and Vine. You know, something a little more, you know, close to that.
I know that there's a number of agents that in the lower mainland who, rather than getting that, will get a void check from the client and just attach that.
Well, that's the same
Same thing,
though.
but-
Yeah.
But they do it in their, like, in their intake process,
Yeah,
and it becomes less of a like, we're tracking you.
yeah, okay.
Well, if that's where
Yeah.
the money came out of, if they just give you a check, whatever, you know, so it is, put something in there. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying, guys.
Yeah.
Just help us, you know, cover our tracks here and say, look, we've addressed that and we're looking at it. And so we're gonna ask now, on all of your deals coming through that you've got something in there, where the money came from. So not only there's a bank draft or a copy of the bank draft, but where that bank draft was drawn from, what account it was drawn from. Going on from there. Anyway, Mike, that's all my housekeeping for today. I thought Ken would be here.
That's traffic.
Ken's right on Ken time.
It's really,
10:30.
it's not.
Anyway, he's
got
got
enough right downtown.
Thanks, everybody. That's
Anybody have any
Thank you.
questions for Doug?
I answered mine.
Did he?
Answered mine.
Yeah, and so and
Right here.
yeah,
You guys, is the tenancy will change for 4 months now?
yeah.
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
4 months, 4 full months.
Yeah, the same as before.
Exactly, right? And so,
And be careful with the tenants in your closing and closing dates.
Sure, if it was.
Because now it's gotta be pushed to 4 months if they stay the full length of their tenants.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up something though. We're actually in the middle of the deal where this is how it can benefit this 4 months. We have someone who needs to sell a property, but she desperately wanted to purchase this one particular property that is tenanted. So we have it under contract now, subject removal is coming up this Sunday. And then we have 4 months to sell her place. So it actually can benefit you in that circumstance if instead of a subject to sale, we now have 4 months to do it. And she has 4 months to figure out bridge financing if need be. It can be beneficial.
yeah, it's got its pros and cons.
Yeah.
But the main point is understand what the rules are.
Yeah.
And be able to relate those rules to the customer. And the customer should always seek legal advice and accounting advice. That's not what we are.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's Ken coming in now.
Signature.
Is that, can you see that's Ken?
Yeah.
How is that? Hey, buddy, come on in.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, just Daisy just reminded me, guys, fill in your paperwork all the way, will you please? Courts and privacy consent, you're missing, print the name in there and signatures if you have them and the dates, okay? Just be very meticulous about your paperwork. Make sure you're filling it right. Take an extra 5 minutes, check it over. It just makes things go a lot smoother for us. We don't have to email you back and forth. So make sure you're filling even those, the other forms, the DORS, disclosure of representation and privacy consent. Fill in it all the way, sign it, initial it, you know, or whatever, and date it, okay, please? Thanks. Sorry, Ken, how are you?
Thanks, how are you? Actually, that's Daisy saying, don't be so lazy with her.
Yeah.
Don't be scared to say lazy. Lazy.
So we've got our main attraction in now. So Doug and I did the first stand up just to warm up the crowd and stuff. Thank you, my friend, for coming in. I hope your summer's going well. So far, so good. Oh, good. So Ken's talking again about the anti-flipping tax and the residential tenancy act. And then we've got some questions that'll happen at the end. But if you're online, if you're into TV land, write them down. We'll read them out at the end because he's probably going to cover a lot of the questions that you're going to have, and it'll make it go an easy flow meeting. Welcome. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
I hope everyone is here.
Yes, please.
Alexa, remember,
That's your mark.
remember you're on time there. So if I do bad, there's a drop.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Anyway, nice to see all you guys again. We are gonna talk about the this new anti-flipping tax that BC is going to bring in next year. Even though it's going to be retroactive 2 years backwards. So it's going to come into effect January 1 next year, but it'll be affecting any property that was purchased January 1 of 2023.
Yeah.
Onwards. So anyway, that's not a good idea, but just to give you guys just a brief flavor of what seems to be happening in the real estate world of as far as law goes. Since 2016, there's been a lot of changes that keep happening faster and faster as far as real estate goes. So prior to 2016, none of these things were in place. If you guys remember, the BC government was going to China every once or twice a year, telling people to come here and buy stuff. And they were trade missions that they went there and said, oh, come to BC and buy, you know, all these new resale condos that are coming out. So 2016, Christy Clark brought in the first provincial foreign buyers tax, 15% at the time. And she gave everyone a week's notice. So she brought it in July, and a week later it was in force. And the interesting thing is she didn't grandfather any deals. So people actually lost some deals because they couldn't come up with an extra 15% to close. So that was just bad legislation. If you're going to make legislation, you should let people have enough time to adjust their affairs, especially if you've purchased property and there was no tax in effect. And now you go to close and there is a tax. So that was the first step. That was number 1, 2016. 2017, if you guys remember, the BC government changed the Residential Tenancy Act and did away essentially with fixed term tenancies. You can still have a fixed term tenancy, you just can't end it. Okay, so it turns into a month tenancy at the end of the fixed term. So prior to 2017, you could have a 1-year tenancy with the tenant. At the end of that, say, okay, we're done. He says, we're done, and you're gone. You go rent it to someone else or move in, whatever you want. That was taken away 2017. So that's another step to basically say, okay, we're going to restrict your rights as a landlord. Now we're going to restrict your ability to sell your property to foreign buyers. 2017, the city of Vancouver, where you guys are all in now here, brought in the empty homes tax. If you remember, that was predicated on 25,000 empty homes in the city of Vancouver, lots of them in Cole Harbor. That was the theory. So we're going to tax everyone 1% unless they have their property occupied for 6 months or more. Now, as it turned out, there was only 2,500 empty homes, according to the city's own stats. But instead of repealing the law, they simply upped the amount. Now it's 3% for the empty homes tax. So it didn't work. That nothing's more affordable here. Rents are not affordable. Housing's not affordable. So obviously this 2017 empty homes tax didn't work, but it's one more restriction on your ability to use your property. 2018, the BC government jumps in with the speculation and vacancy tax. Okay, so it's kind of like the empty homes tax, but it's a little bit different. It applies to most areas of British Columbia. And instead of a 3% tax, it's a 0.5 and a 2% tax. So it's 0.5 if you're a BC resident or a citizen, and it's 2% if you're a so-called foreign entity or foreign buyer. Spec tax, same thing. Basically, it didn't work. Nothing's more affordable. Nothing is more, as it gets, rents are not more affordable, and housing's not more affordable, but it's still there. And it's been there since 2018. The other thing they did when they brought it in is they made it retroactive. Okay, so one thing about legislation,
It's bad enough if you give someone a week's notice, but it's way worse if you say, we're passing it today, but it's effective for last year. Okay, that's what they did with spec tax. They brought it in November, made it effective for January. Okay, so that's really bad. That's really bad legislation, but they did it. And as you guys can see, not only Vancouver, but Surrey and everywhere else that you think of is not affordable and the rents are super high. So the spec tax doesn't work either. Okay, so it's still there.
Got some votes though.
Sorry?
Got a lot of votes.
Well, see, I'll tell you what happened with the spec tax and actually the empty homes tax at a certain point. They sold it to the public and they had all these, you know, radio advertisements and TV ads to say 80% or 90% of BC people are in favor of this. Okay, they're in favor of this tax. But what they meant, people who were voting and were in favor of, were saying this should apply to people who are not Canadian citizens and not permanent residents. That's the way they sold it to everyone. So all these foreign guys are, you know, buying property, parking it here, and it's empty. That's what's driving up the cost. So that's what everyone was accepted. Except at the last minute, both the city of Vancouver and the provincial government said, you know what, let's make it apply to everyone. So it applies to everybody in this room, not just because you're not a citizen or permanent resident. But that's the way they sold it, on the basis of this is who we're going to target. But at the last minute, you know what, we're going to target everyone. So right now, you guys cannot leave your house empty and go buy a condo in Kelowna and say, I'm just going to let it sit there and go there when I feel like it. Okay, and if you live here, you're part of the community, pay your taxes here, you can't do that. Otherwise, you get penalized. So the idea that everybody voted for it, they voted for something, and then the government's the old bait and switch. Let's change it at the last minute, put it in, who cares? Okay, next, after that, you have this Landowner Transparency Act. You guys probably were all aware of this Cullen Commission on Money Laundering. One of the offshoots of that is this Landowner Transparency Act. So every time we do a deal for someone now, we have to file this thing called an LOTR declaration. You have to file more if it's a corporation or a partnership or a trust. So basically you have to say, I own this property and I am the legal owner and the beneficial owner, which means the real owner. And that has to be filed every single time somebody buys property. The idea was that the government did not know, apparently, who owns property in British Columbia, because companies or trusts or partnerships could own property and that wouldn't be evident from the title. So again, that's something we have to do on every single transaction now. It's another entire bureaucracy that exists on top of all the other ones.
Sorry, Ken, on that form you filed, is that also state principal residence or primary residence?
No, this one is just for do you own it or not. Right. So there's two ways you can own property, guys. You can be the real owner and you can be the owner on the title. Now, for most of you does anybody here own a house or a condo? Okay. It's probably in your own name. Yeah. Okay. So, and you really own it. Yeah. Okay. So there's no.
That's questionable.
When I say that, I mean, you can own something on the title, but you don't really own it. That means you're holding it in trust for someone else. Okay. So I could say I own a property, but I'm just on it. I don't really have any interest in it. That's called a trust agreement. In which case, in this LOTR thing we're talking about, you have to declare that. You have to say, yes, I'm on the title, but I don't really own the property. There's a trust in the background. Then we have to file something called a trust, a declaration, an LOTR declaration, which lists all the trustees, the beneficiaries, their names, address, social insurance number, every other thing you can think of, because the government wants to know. Whereas before that, we would simply file the transfer, and there would be perhaps an unregistered trust. Okay. So this wasn't, this isn't endemic. Well, this is like every second file. This is probably one every 500th file, every 1,000th file. But the government made a big deal out of it and said, we're going to create this LOTR registry, and it's there. So it's just one more bureaucracy, just like the spec tax bureaucracy, just like the EHT bureaucracy. There's one more called the Landowner Transparency Registry. So, not to be outdone, 2022, the feds jump in. This is the Trudeau government jumps in and puts in the underutilized housing tax. So this is a federal tax, not a BC government tax. This one is sort of like the same. It's kind of like the spec tax, empty homes tax. This is the federal tax. if you don't use your home 6 months or more, the residential property, you get dinged like a 1% penalty. Now, again, this one is exempt. If you're a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you don't have to file. But the fact is, this is just a federal tax on top of the British Columbia taxes. So one thing that's a bit disconcerting is these governments don't seem to look at each other and say, well, you already have that tax. We'll exempt British Columbia from this because they already have two of these. They have the spec tax and the empty homes tax. Now they can have the underutilized housing tax as well. So that's a third tax that came in. 2023, the foreign buyers ban came in. You guys remember Trudeau announced, okay, if you're not a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you cannot buy residential property in most areas of Canada. That was supposed to be in for 2 years. Now it's been extended till 2027. So anybody who's got a buyer who's not a Canadian citizen, who's not a permanent resident, you have to look at this under this foreign buyers ban to say, well, can they buy? Okay, so that's another tax, another thing stopping you from doing your job, or at least putting a hurdle in your place. Then we have 2023, the federal anti-flipping tax that came into effect last January, not this year, but last year, which basically says if you flip your property, I use that term loosely, flip, which means if you sell your property within a year and you don't fall into prescribed exemptions, such as you were divorced or you lost your job or you went bankrupt or you died, you actually pay tax on any profit you made. So let's say you bought a house today, 6 months from now, you decide you're going to move to Vancouver Island, property's gone up $50,000. You are going to pay income tax on the $50,000. Okay. That means you're not going to pay capital gains tax. You're going to pay full business income tax unless you fall in one of those exemptions. That's the federal law. So this is the first move toward making your principal residence taxable. This is what governments are short of money. The BC government's short of money. The federal government's short of money. There's $5 or $6 trillion locked up in people's houses across Canada. They want some. So the principal residence has been exempt since 1967, and now it's just bit by bit it's going to be fully taxed. At some point, it's just going to be pure business income. So the first step is call it an anti-flipping tax and say, all these people are flipping their properties and making money. Therefore, forget the principal residence exemption, forget the capital gains treatment. We are now going to tax it fully. That's federal tax, and that came in last year. Then, not to be outdone, the one we're going to talk about today is the BC anti-flipping tax. Okay, so it's like, okay, did you guys not read the law from last year? There was a federal tax came in a year ago. Now you're going to do the same thing here. Yeah, that's right. We're going to do the same thing here. So I don't know, you guys, sorry to be just talking. Let me ask you guys some questions. How many sales have you guys done for people in your career where people bought a house and sold it the same year? Is there very many?
Oh, they give you about 4?
Not tons, yeah.
4?
I just did one this week.
Is it common?
It's not a big number.
Oh, it's not common.
Geez, no.
So see, that's my point. So why are we bringing in an anti-flipping tax in BC? And you guys are on the ground. You're the guys who sell the property. You said, well, I just bought this property. This guy, only 3 months later, is selling it. Really? 6 months later, he's selling it? I mean, most people generally keep the property for a while. So this is one of these things that brought in, first of all, there already is an anti-flipping tax, which again makes little sense, but it's a federal tax, which will fully tax your income if you make a profit. Okay, so as I say, you make $100,000, that's going into your income this year. You're going to report it on your taxes next year. So no, that's not good enough. We're going to have a BC version of the same thing, except it's going to be for 2 years, not for 1 year. Okay, so BC says, no, you got to hold your property for 2 years. Again, there's some exceptions, which we can talk about in a minute. But the idea is if you sell your property, buy it now and sell it within 2 years, you're going to pay tax unless you fall into an exemption. And tax is 20% on the profit. So in a worst case scenario, buy a property today, sell it in 6 months, you pay full income tax on the federal side, and then you pay 20% profit tax to the BC government. I mean, that's bad. That's actually getting terrible. Jesus. So again, a couple of reasons why is this, so here's the kicker to this this BC tax. It's supposed to come in January 1 next year. Okay, so right now there is no such tax in BC. So if you bought a property today and sold it December 1st this year, it's not going to be caught by the BC anti-flipping tax. But if you bought it, let's say a year ago, and then you sold it after January 1 next year, it's caught.
Because it goes backwards.
Goes backwards. You've
Yeah.
got to hold the property for 2 years, one way or the other. So in this case, the 2 years goes from January 1 next year backwards 2 years. Okay, so the way they've done it, if you guys know, there is, recently they increased the first time buyers exemption for property transfer tax. So it's now 830,000, I believe. So, and that's not exactly 830,000. It means that you can buy a property up to 830,000 and the first 500,000 is exempt. So it's not like it's exempt. It's more exempt than what it was before, but it's not fully exempt. But from 830 to 850 or 860, the tax gets smaller, the exemption gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So at and so it phases out. And they've been doing that for years. So they say, it's fully exempt up to this point, and then the exemption gets smaller and smaller. I believe it's at 860, it's 0. Okay, so this is the same idea. In year 2, the 20% starts going down. Okay, so by the end of year 2, it's 0. So year 1, it's a full 20%. Year 2, it keeps declining. The closer and closer you sell it to the end of 2 years, there's no tax. Okay, so the problems I see with this is, first of all, like I said, there already is a federal tax, so that's already there. They're making it retroactive. So instead of saying January 1 next year onwards, well, no, why would we do that? We're going to get some revenue from the past 2 years. So it's retroactive. It won't work because, just like you guys' own personal experience, I've talked to other realtors. It's very rare that someone actually sells their property within a year or 2. Why did you just go to all the trouble of buying it? Move in, do the whole bit, get all your kids in school and everything. Well, let's move. Like, why? So again, it's one of these taxes that is addressing a problem that doesn't exist. But as you know, there's an election coming up in BC in a few months, and that's the reason. Okay, because wow, we're going to look like we're doing something. That's a 30-point plan 8 years ago. That's going to make BC housing affordable and rents affordable. You can see what's happened. Nothing. It's gone totally the opposite. This is just another one of these things that supposedly looks good, but it won't do anything. It also encroaches on your property rights. One thing, because you guys are all in real estate, that's kind of what we do is real estate. One of the foundations of having a free country is that you have property rights. You have civil rights. Okay, no one can just come and arrest you and take away your property. But property rights are just as important. So you own a house, and within certain parameters, you get to have the house and use the house and sell the house and do whatever you want with the house. And that keeps shrinking. So all these things that stop you from making a lawful use of your house, such as I have a house in a cottage at the lake and I leave it empty because I don't want anybody in it. When I'm not there, I can't do that anymore. Okay, so that's taking away some rights from me. And this just seems to keep going on. Every time we turn around, there's another law taking away one more of your rights. And it's kind of like the frog in the pot of water that's boiling. And eventually the frog's boiled, but it's just bit by bit by bit. And we just keep letting it happen. So this is another case, this BC anti-flipping tax. And again, it's just more revenue for the government. BC government basically takes in $3.5 billion a year of property transfer tax. They're used to it. They rely on it. It's a huge source of income. This is just more money for BC government. People don't seem to bat an eyelash when there's another tax taking away more of your money. And so like, as I say, this is a general kind of a trend for both governments, federal and provincial, to make your principal residence taxable, because it's one of the few things left, other than perhaps a TFSA, that's tax-free. Okay. And so the problem you have is that, I mean, we always have been encouraging people to buy something, anything, just buy something, buy a studio apartment, I don't care what, because eventually you'll pay it off. Maybe you'll move up to a larger place or a townhouse or eventually a house. And then when you retire, you will have a nice nest egg, which is tax-free. Okay, because if you don't, Most of you, I would imagine anyone who has a pension here, we don't have pensions at our firm. So most people don't have pensions unless you work for a big company or the government. So that house is your kind of part of your retirement fund. Okay, but it shouldn't be taxable because you waste, you built it up. So you get your federal pension when your old age pension, $1,000 a month or some ridiculous amount like that. You can't live on that. So you have your house. So, okay, I'll sell my house in Vancouver and I'll go move to the island. Then I'll put this extra money aside. Now I can live on it. No, that's not good enough. We're going to tax that. We'll take half or more. So you see, this is wrong. So this is where people have to stand up and say, no, this is my house and this is part of my retirement plan. This is part of the government's changed the capital gains exemption rules just recently from 50% to 66%. So what that means is a capital gain. If any of you guys own an apartment or some property that you don't live in, and it's gone up in value and you sell it, you normally pay a capital gains tax on that. You don't pay full income tax on it. Okay, so capital gain means you pay tax on half the increase. Okay, so it's, in other words, half it's tax free. So the federal government, again, being short of money, says, no, we're going to change that. We're going to say it's 66%. We're going to tax instead of 50. Okay, so why? Because we need more money. So apparently that will raise $17 billion a year for them. And according to the Canadian Taxpayers Association, that takes them about a week to spend that. But $17 billion a week, that's what the feds blow through the tax rate. So that extra tax on all these people is going to actually allow the government to operate for a week. Okay. And of course, so again, the idea is that let's make your house taxable. Okay, so it's, to me, that's just wrong. Canadians need that. They need that income. That's why we've been telling people for years, buy a house, buy a condo, buy a studio, buy anything, because it's a savings for you. But anyway, maybe it's going to change. So a couple of things about this exemption. So there are some exemptions from this BC tax. If you die, you can sell your property and pay that 20%. If you get ill or you have a disability and you have to move, if you have an eligible relocation, which means the government gets to say what kind of relocation of your house is eligible. If somebody moves into your house or a relative or you get married and suddenly the house is too small, the condo is too small, you can move. If you're divorced, if you're fired, if there's a threat to your personal safety, that's the next thing. You go bankrupt. If your house is destroyed, well, that's kind of logical for a house in farm. If you're foreclosed, that's another funny one, because if you're foreclosed, probably it's not because your property went up in value. It's not too likely. So those are some of the exemptions that you could claim to say, well, I don't want to pay this 20% tax if I sell my property within the 2-year limit. But it looks like you're going to have to file a PTT tax return within 90 days of selling your property in order to get these exemptions. So it's not like you just, okay, well, I sold it. If you sold it more than 2 years later, then you don't have to file anything. But if you're going to sell it within the 2 years and you want an exemption, you have to file this PTT form, a BC government form, within 90 days of selling. You say, well, this is the exemption I'm claimed. I got divorced. That's why we sold the house. Or I got fired. This is why I went bankrupt, whatever.
Do those exemptions kind of reflect the same as the feds exemption?
They're similar. The feds exemptions, there's not quite as many, but they have death, divorce.
Right.
I've got a little bit of a list of them here, but they're
pretty much.
they're similar. What the government seem to not do is, well, why don't we look at their legislation and say, okay, they've got 5, let's use those 5. No, that would make too much sense. Let's have different ones. And the definitions are also different as well. So what is a principal residence for the Federal Act is different from a principal residence for the BC Act, which is different for a principal residence for the Speculation and Vacancy Act, and it's different for the empty homes tax. So you might say, well, this is a principal residence under this legislation, but not under this one, because they define it differently. So it's almost like, well, can't you guys get together and say, well, here's a definition that makes sense and we can use it for everything? No, so that would be common sense. That would make things logical. And the thing about it is, as a regular citizen, I mean, forget it if you're a lawyer and you do real estate, you're supposed to know the law. You're supposed to know it. Well, I don't know, you have a job, you don't normally take legal courses in your spare time, but you're supposed to know all the law. So you're supposed to know all these definitions and you're supposed to know all of these rules that change, it seems, every week. So, again, this flipping tax applies to residential property, and it can be residential property sold by a person, by a corporation, by a partnership, or a trust. And so again, it appears to exempt commercial property. That's an interesting thing. The federal foreign buyers ban also does not deal with commercial property. So this is kind of interesting. So in some senses, commercial property, farmland, stuff like that is very valuable property, but it's not, apparently doesn't matter if anybody else buys that. So as I say, the idea is 20% on the income sold within 365 days, and it shrinks down by the end. So generally, when does this thing start? When does this 2-year period start? When you buy the property, it starts. And then when you sell the property, generally when you close on your real estate deal, that's when it ends. So you have this 2 years. Can I fit in that 2-year window? It also applies to assignments. So if you buy a pre-sale from a developer, that's applicable. If you assign that pre-sale contract to somebody else, that's also applicable. So if you're flipping these contracts, it's subject to this. There are again some other exemptions. If you sell your property to a related individual, that's going to be exempt. So your dad sold the property to the kid, that's fine, that's exempt. And then the kid's ownership, it relates back to the day the dad bought the property. So that 2 years kind of expands because he said, well, dad brought it and then I bought it from him. And so I can use his purchase date to push the 2 years out, which is interesting. So related individuals, and I believe they actually define related individual a little bit differently than they do for the Property Transfer Tax Act, but generally it's, somebody in your family. And interestingly enough, well, again, these are some examples that just don't happen. And here's a funny one. It says, if you sold your principal residence within 2 years, but you lived in it for at least 1 year, you can be eligible for a deduction of up to $20,000 on the tax you would have paid. Well, this is kind of funny. It's like, instead it should be zero, but we're going to give you a break. If you lived in the property for at least a year as your principal residence, you can claim up to a $20,000 deduction off your tax that you would have paid. So, well, thanks very much. First of all, it should be zero. Now you're telling me I can keep some of it. So I don't know. Sometimes I shake my head on this. And the wording, this is actually from the government's website. The wording is curious. I mean, they say here, you must file a BC flipping tax return within 90 days of the sale if any of these things qualify. If you qualify for the tax, that's a funny statement. I could qualify for a rebate. I can qualify for a gift. I can qualify for something, but I don't qualify for the tax. I get taxed. I'm subject to a tax. It says if you qualify for the tax as you sold your property within 729 days, it's like a bonus. I qualify. I qualify. And so you get this exemption after you file a return, which means you won't end up having to pay that extra money if you fall into one of those exemptions. There are some other curious exemptions. Developers have some exemptions if they build properties on lots. Actually, interestingly enough, if you buy a property and you renovate it or you build a house on it and sell it within that time, you seem to be exempt as well. And I guess the idea is they want more property to be built too. So if you're, buy an old house and you renovate it, sell it within that time, you're going to be exempt on that. And again, this falls in line with this thing that just came into effect at the end of June, this whole rezoning of everything where everybody now can have, a duplex, triplex, fourplex, sixplex on their property. So this is sort of consistent with that to say, well, if you build more units, if you're bringing more stuff onto the market, then we'll exempt. So, and developers can also be exempt as well if they bought a property and they got sort of partway into the deal and said, nah, this isn't gonna work, and then we resold it, they're gonna be exempt as well. So, I mean, generally speaking, is this tax a good idea? No, because it won't work. And it's just one more layer of bureaucracy. And it's going to just make you guys, more, it'll be more interesting for you guys, because, it might be something just mentioned to your client. I don't think you have to mention it because that's their problem after they buy the property. We generally mention it to them. And just to say that, guys, just not that you're planning to sell this right away, but if you do, there's going to be some tax consequences unless you fall into one of these exemptions. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys all sell real estate. So what do you think about this tax? Is this a good idea? Is it going to do anything? Because I'm open. I mean, I don't have the final word. I mean, you guys are on the ground selling. What do you think?
It's complicated. It confuses people.
Yeah.
It takes confidence out of the market.
The fact they even call it flip.
Well, it's
Back
not
in
really
the day.
flipping. See, that's the thing.
But
Yeah.
they're calling it flip, and then all people think of, well, that's when they were flipping homes in Richmond, and 2 weeks, here's the price, and the guy goes down the street, can you give me another 300 grand?
Yeah.
So as soon as you hear the word flip, it's those damn realtors and all their criminal friends.
Exactly. And you see, that's partly the media's fault, because they're just regurgitating this information they get from the government. And as soon as you say, well, I flipped my property, well, really, did I flip my property? Maybe I decided I didn't like the house. Maybe an opportunity came up by somewhere else. Does that mean I automatically flipped it? I might not have. And the thing is that this has always been the law, that if you buy houses and you actually do flip them. So a lot of people, we've had clients over the years who will buy a house, they'll move into it, totally renovate it, and a year or two later they sell it. They make a profit on it. It's totally tax exempt because it's principal residence. Then they do it again. Then they do it again. Then they do it again. By like 5, 6, 7 houses later, they're living in a mansion. Okay. CRA has always taken the position that if you're in the house for enough time, like people used to think that's an automatic 1 year goal. Well, practically maybe. There was no real hard and fast rule. It's like if you had an intention to live in this house and renovate it, and that's your house, and you decide to sell it, well, that's good for you. Now, if you do it too often, and this is in the past, they will eventually come and say, no, you can't. Nobody does this. Nobody buys a house 1 year, another one. So people who were good at this used to wait a year or two, at least, sometimes 3, and it's just going to fly under the radar. So that was always the case. Your house could always be taxed if the government determined that this was a business, not a real principal residence. But now it seems that doesn't matter. We don't care. It can be really your principal residence. We're still going to take a piece of it. So, as I say, this idea of this language of calling it a flip, that means it's bad. Flipping is bad. BC speculation and vacancy tax. Do you know how many times the word speculation appears in that 130-page act? Do you know how many times the word speculation appears in there?
That was a none?
0. It's just in the title, the act. So the act is to say, well, we're going to stop speculating. Oh, they didn't define speculating. It doesn't appear anywhere in the entire act. So again, it's just using the language to inflame people to say, oh, this is stop speculating. No, it isn't. It doesn't stop anyone from speculating. And this is the same thing. Well, if we call it a flipping tax, everyone's on board because we those greedy flippers, they're all just out to make money. Second question I would say is, what's wrong with making money?
Yeah.
Like, is this like a crime now to make a profit?
Government doesn't want us to make money though.
But if you don't make money, you can't pay any taxes. And since the government's short of tax money right now, this is a bad thing. Like, you can't discourage people from making a profit. Let's say you did buy a property and 6 months from now you sold it and you made 50 grand. So what? Somebody else got the property.
They're happy.
Is that a crime because you sold the property? No, but we're gonna make it taxable.
I was gonna say, this flipping tax won't affect anything, because one of the biggest questions I get from sellers is, when's a good time to sell? And now I'm just gonna put that into my language with them after 2 years.
Yep.
Like, they want our advice on that, that's my advice.
Yeah, because why would you pay tax on something that you don't have to? So
Yeah.
in a sense, all it does is push it out. Like, but the problem is that it'll become 3 years, then it'll become 5 years, then it'll become permanent. See, this is the problem when they say, it's like the BC or the City of Vancouver empty homes tax, it was 1%. And I think it was 1.5, 1.75. Now it's 3. Now they want to put it up to 5. So it never, when they say something, they never are going to stick with that. So we'll never do that. We'll never increase it. Yeah, you. The idea is, of course, eventually the plan is let's make this whole thing taxable. And as like I said, you guys, hopefully you guys are all homeowners or going to be homeowners. There's no way we should put up with that. Say this is your home. It should not be taxed. So this is a political thing. We can't really do anything. All we can do is look at the legislation and say, here it is. This is how you deal with it. But on a political level, yeah, you need a different government.
No, you need a government that's gonna promote that. Okay, none of the governments promote it.
That's true.
They all just follow the line.
Yeah.
Nobody out there saying, we're gonna cut back in taxes, we're gonna cut back in government. We're gonna, get that in there, maybe you get a change.
Well, that's the federal conservatives are saying that. The BC conservatives are saying that. Now, again, unfortunately, governments do get into office and they don't do what they said. That's one of the problems. It's a cartoon that says, this is a Peanuts cartoon where the girl, she says, well, do all fairy tales start with once upon a time? And then Charlie Brown says, well, no, actually, most of them start with if I'm elected, I will. That's the problem really with, can you believe what they say? But I mean, that's all you can go on for now. If someone says, I'm going to reduce government, I'm going to take this tax out, I'm going to reduce this, and I'm going to promote business, because where does the money come from? Business. Okay, so like I said, is it a crime to make money?
Yeah,
I don't think so. Yeah.
To your point about that there's a small percentage of properties that are bought and sold within a year or 2 years. I just recently heard that there are some countries in Europe that they have a kind of a flipping tax that's actually 10 years. So now that makes me suspicious that they're starting out with the 2 years, and then, as you say, they're changing things so rapidly and on the spot and instantly. Who's to say that that timeline's gonna not going to increase?
Well, that's absolutely right. And once your foot is in the door, you're just gonna keep pushing it hard. The fact is, when your foot goes in the door, that's when you have to slam the door on the person. Say, no, we're not putting up with this as people. Okay, because like I said, all of you here, you work hard, you buy a house, you buy whatever type of property you can, that's going to be part of your retirement. Okay, so why should we tax it? Because the government is not going to give you money when you're retired. Trust me, where they're going, they're not going to have any money, period.
$690 a month right now.
So that's how much you get. Okay.
Well, no, but now because I still work, it's just
Right.
keeps,
Yeah,
it'll be about 48
Funny.
hours.
they take some of it back too.
Oh, do they ever?
So they'll say you can't rely on the government when you get older to pay for your later years. And your house is a big deal. That's, a lot of people sell their house and go move to a less expensive place. We have lots of clients moving to the island. We have lots of clients moving to Alberta. Why? Because the cost of living is less. You can buy a nice house in Lethbridge for $275,000 to $300,000. So, that's not even a down payment here. So the bottom line is, I hope you guys all vote. I hope everybody votes in the federal election next year and the provincial election this year, because that's the only way you can make a difference. So we can look at the law. You can say, well, we can try to deal with it, which we will. We don't have to do that. But the best thing is to just have somebody come in, makes different laws. So the same thing's happening with the Residential Tenancy Act. And again, I would say, in my view, if I could get rid of all the renters, all of them, put them in the market. So buy something if you can. But most people start off renting and then eventually they can buy something. So if you want to fix things for rental, make rentals more available or more affordable, just move people into houses. You have to get people to be owners, not renters, if you can. But in this particular case, the NDP government feels their constituents are renters, so they keep piling the screws on landlords. But, we have rent control here. Sometimes with inflation and whatnot, you've got 10-12% increase in your costs as a landlord, you can raise the rent 2%. Okay, so it's prescribed every year of how much you can raise the rent. And of course, the problem with that is it creates an incentive for a landlord to get rid of the tenant. Okay, so now after 5 years, I'm still charging this guy $2,000 a month, and the rents are now $3,000. So if I'm gonna get up to that at 2%, 3%, 1%, no percent, it's gonna take me 20 years to get the rent up to 3,000. And by then the market value is gonna be 4,000 or 5,000. So this gives the landlords an incentive to kick the tenant out. That's why they call it rent evictions. And it's okay, well, I'm gonna move I had a lady just last year. She was living in a place in Cloverdale and renting the bottom of a house. And she was being, it's about $1,000, $1,200 a month rent. And the landlord had raised her rent 25% the year before, which was illegal because it's usually 1 or 2%. But she was paying it anyway, and they were giving her a hard time because she was late on her rent. So we talked to her and said, okay, well, first of all, they can't do that. They cannot charge you 25% increase rent. So we got the landlord to refund all her rent for the last 2 years, all at 25% increase. And so that basically dropped her rent from like $1,200 to $950. So then as a retaliation, they said, okay, we're kicking you out. Here's your notice. Our son is going to move in now. So they kicked her out. Okay, so that was, and so for now, if you kick someone out like that, you have to move in there yourself, or your family has to move in for at least 6 months. Okay, so the government's going to change the RTA Act, make that 12 months. Okay, so if you kick someone out and you don't move in, or your family doesn't move in, right now, if the tenant finds out about that, they can sue you through the Residential Tenancy Board or branch for up to a year's rent. Okay, so if you kick them out, but you don't live in there for 6 months, that's what can happen. So they're going to change that as well. They're going to say it can be 12 months or basically whatever we say. So we can prescribe whatever amount we want. So we make 24 months, 36 months, whatever. So this is not enforced yet. They're also going to make you give the tenant 4 months notice to vacate instead of 2 months notice. Okay, that's not in yet, but it's coming in fairly soon. So these are all, the problem when you guys write a contract, so just for something, the point of practice, if you're acting for a seller and there's a tenant in the property, you never want to say vacant possession, never, because you can't guarantee vacant possession as a landlord. This tenant doesn't move out, he doesn't move out. Nothing you can do about it. You can go to the residential tenancy branch, make an application. That's 2 to 3 months down the road. That tenant is staying there during that time. Meanwhile, your buyer thinks he's moving in, he's not. Okay, so if you're acting for a seller, never put vacant possession. If there's a tenant in, put in subject to existing tenancy. Now, you can also put another clause in saying, if you ask me, I will give notice under section 49 of the Residential Tenancy Act for the tenant to vacate. So right now, that's going to be 2 months. The tenant may or may not vacate after 2 months. So a lot of tenants know that, yeah, guess what? If I don't vacate, nothing you can do about it. And we'll have another 3 months before we get to the residential tenancy branch.
And they probably haven't paid rent for those 3 months.
Well, that's a different thing. You can still make an application, a different application for someone not paying rent, but you can, if they dispute it, they can still have an application.
Drag it out.
On some of these applications in Ontario can be a year or two. Here it's 2 or 3 months, but there it can be a year, maybe 2 years. So the thing about it is, so that's if you're a landlord, or sorry, if you're a seller. If you're a buyer, on the other hand, when you're writing an offer, you want to say vacant possession. And if the guy is smart on the other side, the realtor, they'll go, no, can't do that, which is subject to tenancy, and we'll give the guy notice. So again, the only kind of notice you can give is on a month to month. You cannot give someone notice on a fixed term lease. Remember, we said there still are fixed terms lease. You just can't enforce them when they roll over. So if someone has 6 months left on the lease, you cannot give them notice. You could give them notice for 6 months, but you can't give them notice for 2 months. Okay, unless they decide. So the safest bet, if you can, is to get something called a mutual agreement to end tenancy. So that's an agreement between the tenant and the landlord. It's a prescribed form. And if this tenant signs that and the landlord signs it, it's done. There's no appeal. There's no nothing. The guy's gone on that day. Now, sometimes you have to pay the guy money to do that. That's a negotiation. That's your safest bet. The other thing that's coming in is this idea, when you give the tenant notice, they're gonna create another, some kind of web portal where you have to go to the government and make an application to actually give the tenant notice, and you have to pay the government money to do that. So that's gonna be mandatory.
The portal is up and running.
Oh, is it now?
Yeah.
You have to
Everything's.
Have you tried it yet?
As of July 18th, I took a look at everything, and they require you to put in your contract of purchase and sale, which is in complete violation of privacy.
Totally.
And they're asking for birthdays of all people who are going to be living in the property, which again opens the whole thing up to a whole, like, if you've got a minor coming into the property, you're not gonna give their birthday out. It's absolutely asinine. Like, it's crazy. And it's yeah, so the portal's up and running, and you can check it out if you want.
So again, one more hurdle if you're a landlord. So the idea is,
Under Tenancy portal. Yeah.
here's the funny thing is they keep saying we want more affordable housing, so that we want more affordable rents. But we are going to make it so hard for you to be a landlord, no one is gonna be a landlord. This is the crazy thing. We're gonna put the screws to the landlord so much that people, you know what? Hell with this. I'll put my money in the stock market. I'll put my money in commercial property. You know, we've done some commercial strata warehouses, you know, where somebody puts a body shop or whatever. These things have gone up like 600-800% in the last 7 or 8 years. So I mean, if you're gonna be a landlord in a commercial strip mall, strata, you know, strata warehouse, there's no residential tenancy act, there's nothing. Like, it's commercial. Okay, plus those significant that have gone through the roof. I honestly couldn't believe how much they've gone up. But anyway, that'll push landlords into commercial stuff because they go, you know what, I don't need to put up with all this crap. So then there will be less housing available for people to rent.
Well, and then there won't be anybody investing in resales, because it doesn't make any sense to, which means there's not gonna be any properties built. So enjoy.
Well, this is killing the golden goose. You see, you're in the business of real estate. We're in the law side of it. I mean, it's been such a bonanza that let's just keep taking more from it, taking more to eventually it's killed it. It's killed the market. And then they go, oh, how did that happen? Jeez.
Yeah, we've got no.
Well, it's like the cod fisheries in the east there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just get depleted it so badly.
Yeah.
That they just had to do a moratorium on the whole thing and cut it all off. That'll be here. The market will crack and that's it.
Well, and why will that? Because it's just too much. You can't pile stuff onto people and the realtors and the landlords and everybody else, just more and more and more, and never take a break, never step back.
And on top of it, with this tenancy thing, which is absolutely crazy, so 4 months for a tenant to move out, which I understand maybe from the tenant's point of view. But none of those properties that are up for rent get listed till a month before. So what are they gonna do for 4 months? There's nothing coming on the market. It's a, hey, these are coming up 4 months in advance.
Well, they can move out early. They don't have to move out.
Sorry?
They could move out early.
Yeah, but
But
it's.
But again, you still have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
This is the problem, and you know, and I get it, your point's well taken. If you're a tenant, you get kicked out, well, where do I go?
I guess it gives them 4 months to find a better place for them.
Yeah, but of course, there's shortage of places because they can't build fast enough. Yeah.
So the position would be like 4 months, maybe and a half after they sign the contract, they do subject to inspection, they do the inspection, but in that long period, anything can happen to the property and then the new buyer is like, I don't know, anything damage to the property and changes the property.
You mean if the tenant damages the property before they leave?
Yeah.
Well, that's
The
always.
appliances not working, stop working.
Yeah, that's a risk, but it's not usually that often. That usually kind of damage happens in a foreclosure, not in kicking a tenant out. Usually with tenants, they just don't move out. And they know they have 2 or 3 more months on top of the 4 months to basically stay there until there's a.
The other thing on that, Ken, is we got a deal where we got an accepted offer with the tenant in it. It's supposed to be for 4 months. And we're working for the buyer. We got a dispute here from the tenant after all subjects were removed. The tenant disputed the move out. So now that's got to go through all of that and it's going to affect our deal and the closing of the deal. So, and they have a month to dispute it after they give a notice. So
Right.
after you're subject to removed on your contract, the tenant has 1 month to dispute their eviction.
Yeah, I believe that used to be 2 weeks, but now it's gone to a month. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's now full 30 days.
They delivered their dispute to us as well. We weren't even on the contract.
Mhm.
So this just to cause problems. And I think at the end of the day on that one there, I think the landlord paid him out.
Well, that's a lot of times that happened. I had one of those where my client did these sort of the same idea and they paid him $15,000 to go away. And he did.
So that's your profit.
Well, basically, but you see, if you're a landlord and you've committed to vacant possession in the contract, it's vacant possession. So if I'm the buyer and that's in my contract and you can't get rid of the tenant, that's your problem. You're paying my costs, you're paying my moving costs, you're paying my hotel costs, you're paying everything until that guy's out. That's why, as I say, when you guys are accepting and you're asking for a seller, no, that's not vacant possession. We're not putting that in the contract. We'll put subject to the existing tenancy and we will give notice. We'll make sure we dot the i's and cross the t's. That's all we could do.
So if you have, sorry, Chris, if you have in there subject to current vacancy,
No,
But-
current tenancy.
or current tenancy, sorry. And then the buyer comes, and says, can you give him notice?
Yeah.
The seller doesn't have to, does he? Because
He
in
does.
the contract, you said you're taking the tenant.
No, well, we generally put that in the contract as well. You can say, if you get notice under section 49, you'll give the notice.
Right, but if the buyer doesn't ask,
If the buyer doesn't ask, you don't have to give
then
notice.
perfect, yeah.
Then you just assume that the guy's assuming the tenant.
He's taking it. Here's the keys, the tenant's right there. Adios amigos.
Better off to negotiate something with the tenant, say $25,000. Because if you're gonna list the property and it's vacant, you're gonna get $25,000 over what anyone else is gonna get. You've actually got a vacant property.
Well,
Totally.
especially now.
The money from here over to here.
Totally, and negotiation's always the better route. Lawsuits, arbitrations, all this crap, you always do better negotiating.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm under contract right now. Subjects are due to come off on Sunday. And we'll serve our notice for August 1st, and then our contract says December 1st. We just put vacant possession.
Mhm.
The seller's agent didn't do what you're just saying, so. If the tenant didn't move out, basically the seller would have to pay our clients like.
Sellers in breach contract.
Yeah, gotcha.
See, so you're guaranteeing something you can't control.
Yeah.
That's the problem. When you, as a seller, you can't have that clause in there. If there's a tenant, sorry, subject to tenancy. And if you want us to give notice, we'll give notice, but that's all we can do. And then it becomes the buyer's problem. So let's say on the closing date, the tenant's still there. Oh, too bad. It's your problem. You bought it subject to the existing tenants. We gave the tenant notice. Take care of it.
Yeah. And then the second thing I was gonna bring up, Ken, we also have a listing where there's no tenancy agreement. The landlord just rented it to somebody up at the table. Verbally, pays good rent and everything, but what would be the legal repercussions there, in your opinion?
Well, the Residential Tenancies Act says that tenancy has to be in writing.
Okay,
Has to be.
so our tenant there would have rights, right?
Yes,
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
You know, when you go to the Residential Tenancy Board,
Yeah.
and most of those hearings are on the phone now, they're just, I don't know if there's any actual in-person hearings. You know, they may well say, yeah, that's the law, it should be, that's what the law says, but de facto, you have been renting with a verbal contract for 2 years or whatever it is, you're paying rent, you can prove that. It wouldn't surprise me if they'd say, we will make the landlord write up a residential tenancy, we'll make an order on those terms.
Oh, yeah.
So then I don't think it just becomes invalid, because then you're kind of shafting the tenant, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's more like about the mutual agreement, can it be without a date? Because the situation I have right now is the tenant has agreed they will leave within a month. But can we do that prior to getting offers? Because,
Yeah, I think you can do that anytime you want. If the tenant agrees and there's a form under the Residential Tenancy Act, I don't know, maybe they've changed that again, who knows, but there was one. But the tenant and the landlord said, yes, we, by agreement, we agree to terminate our tenancy on this date. It doesn't even have to be 2 months or 4 months, it can be any date, be next week. But it's an agreement between the parties, and quite often the tenant's gonna say, okay, some cash, and we'll go away.
Yeah, tenants know that if it's vacant, it's much easier to list.
It is.
Here's 10 grand, get out, and I can list the vacant property.
Pre-sale assignments. You say it's 2 years back from January 2025, you're gonna have to pay the flipping tax.
Yeah,
This is for a pre-sale assignment.
Yeah, if you're assigning in pre-sale, that's covered by this flipping tax.
Mhm.
So it would still go backwards 2 years. So if you bought something, you know. January this coming year backwards, so it'd be January 2023. Yeah, that's still gonna be, if you flip it, you're still gonna get stuck. with
You're gonna get
20%.
20% on it. So that's a big no.
Yeah.
Another question that came in, was, Canadian living in India buys a property in Vancouver to rent. What taxes are due? On that, so they're Canadian citizens living in India, coming to buy a property, gonna rent it out and go back to India.
Okay, well,
What
they
tax?
can do that. I mean, because they're Canadian, they're entitled to buy.
Yeah.
If they're gonna rent it out, that gets them by that. The spec tax and the anti-homes tax, if it's rented property, so the only tax they're gonna pay on that. Would be the income tax on the rent. Okay, so presumably, I'm assuming these guys are non-residents, these guys in India.
Yeah, they're non-resident, Canadian non-resident.
So when you rent a property as a non-resident, you have to withhold 25% of the rent and remit it to Revenue Canada every month. And then at the end of the year, you file a tax return and you get most of your money back because you can deduct, the income, the mortgage income, the taxes, the strata fees, and all this other kind of stuff. So, but the whole point that guy has to know is that if he gets a property management company to do this for him, they'll just tell him. But otherwise, people don't necessarily know, well, I live in India, this guy pays me rent, I just take the rent. So no, you have to pay tax on the rent, but you also have to withhold 25% every month and ship it to Revenue Canada.
Fair enough, okay. Just one more to kind of beat a dead horse here, GST on assignments. The initial amount, the original purchase price.
Mhm.
I mean, the contract, it's all, the onus is on the original buyer. The assignor, not the assignee. But what about the lift?
The lift is going to be subject to tax. It's going to be subject to. Like the CRA changed the rules on this about a year and a half ago. So what they used to do when you flipped an assignment is they would, you guys will all look at an assignment contract, your board kind of drawn up assignment contract. So they would define what the assignment price is. They would say, here's the original deposit, here's the lift, here's the total assignment price on the bottom. Okay, so CRA used to say, okay, we're going to charge you GST on the whole thing. Which would make no sense. Why would I pay GST on the deposit? So last year and a half ago, they said, okay, we're going to do away with that. So we're just going to charge you GST on the lift, but it's going to be GST all the time. There's no exemption. We don't care why you bought it, whether it was personal use or an additional use payment. So the difference is it's going to be payable, but it's not going to be payable on the deposit.
So you'd have to put in the contract that the original owner would pay, the original buyer, the signer would pay GST on the original amount or on the lift amount. And the buyer you'd have to specify who pays what tax in the contract.
Yeah, but I think your assignment contract, your standard one says this, the assignor is stuck with the tax.
Yeah,
period.
yes,
So he's gonna be stuck with the tax on the lift.
on everything.
Yeah. But not on the deposit. Like this is,
Other than the deposit.
yeah,
The
yeah,
original amount in the lift.
yeah.
Okay.
And of course, he could also be stuck with this flipping tax now too in BC. And I believe he can also be stuck with federal flipping tax because that's another tax. So yeah, this is why I said it just makes it, you always want to like sit on the property for now, in this case, rent it out for 2 years. Now, I say this, if this government doesn't get in the fall in BC, that tax is probably going to go away. That's my guess.
Maybe come back in a different form.
Well, I don't think so. I don't, maybe, but the point is, make sure you guys all vote. I mean, I don't care who you vote for, but just vote, because honestly, in Canada, about 40% of people don't vote federally. And I think in BC, it's probably less, like it's probably worse. Municipal elections, it's even worse. And so, I mean, the thing is, it's hard to complain if we don't vote. Just pick the candidate that supports your view. You guys are realtors, so you think you'd want to support a candidate that's pro real estate.
Pro business.
Pro business, exactly. 'Cause this is a business. You guys all do everything pro bono, right? Nobody charges anybody money for anything. Of course you do. That's your job. So, try and vote for somebody that supports your industry.
One more quickie, you
Yep.
mentioned some when you're talking there about old house renovation, no taxes. You bought an old house renovated,
Yeah, well, for this flipping tax, for the BC
Okay.
flipping tax, if you bought an old house and renovated it, sold it within 2 years, you're not gonna get a tax.
Define old.
But you'd have to pay the GST then because you
Yeah,
renovated.
If you
95%.
renovated over 90%, you're subject to GST, but you wouldn't be subject to this flipping tax.
Would you have to make more units when you renovate it? Okay.
No.
So it could
And
still be
just-
one single family.
Could be, yeah.
Oh, and how much renovation do you have to do?
Well, this one is a substantial renovation as well, so this one
Doesn't say
is,
a percentage.
no, this isn't percentage, but it's.
Condos are not.
If that was 82% renovated, it's meant to be 84.
You hit the bathroom floor. It was substantial.
You're out by 1%,
So-
change the light bulbs.
What I always suggest, guys, is the only point of like talking about this is just so you know there's an issue. Like if you have a specific fact situation, so this is what I plan to do, give us a call. We can always look into it and try to put the facts with the law. As opposed, this is just generally something you should know. Because if you don't know about it, you don't deal with it and it just slips by. And then your client finds out about it later and they're not happy. That's the whole point of real estate, because you guys still are considered to be like a guarantor. You're supposed to know everything. You're supposed to be a tax accountant. You're supposed to be an appraiser. You're supposed to know the value of the property. You're supposed to know whether the dishwasher works or not. All these kind of things you're supposed to know. And it just keeps growing. So
It's hard to keep up.
it makes your job
I
tough.
get getting confused these
Yeah.
days.
100%.
It's because things change. That's the problem. They change too fast.
Yeah, the files are so thick now, just to get going, it's crazy.
You find the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yours will probably triple.
Well, thanks for scaring the shit out of us. Really appreciate that. But guys, I think Ken's takeaway is we're not accountants and we're not lawyers. We should be able to direct them to the amazing professionals that we know. And Ken's team is the number one in my world for that. And it's not all about real estate, guys. We're business owners. We represent homeowners, we represent investors, we represent business owners, we represent people with kids that are trying to get in the market. And my opinion on the federal and our provincial government is they're trying to really harm that sector of the population. So when the vote comes, understand who you represent. We're 100,000 plus professionals in this country that know 500 people each. It's a big number, big votes, and we need to start making sure that they're trying to take away too much. We're in this as it's a big fight, and these next votes are going to really decide where we're going to go as a country and where we're going to be viewed from the world. Because if we're not allowing investors to come in, and we're allowing the people to come, that the ones that are coming in just to disrupt everything and try to change, we've got a good section of people here. We got 28 languages in this office, and we all have the same personalities and styles and goals. We're driven, right? That's what we want. That's what we really want. So Ken, thank you very much. And if you have any questions for Ken, you got his contact information in the emails and in the WhatsApps. Just send them to him. Doug, thanks for your time. Daisy, thanks for keeping everybody in order. And Anjali and Angel, thanks for making us look great.